I was crouched on the floor of my walk-in closet, trying to find the matching shoe to the only pair of nude pumps I owned that didn't make my feet bleed. My niece's 7th birthday party started in 40 minutes. My sister had texted me 3 times that morning asking if I was bringing the ice cream cake, and I had texted back 3 times that yes, I was. It was already in the cooler in my trunk. Please stop asking. I was 31 years old, and I lived alone in a 2-bedroom condo in a Denver suburb where everyone's lawn looked like a Pinterest board. And on that Saturday in early March, I thought my biggest problem was going to be whether the cake would survive the drive to my sister's house in Highlands Ranch. Then my phone went off. Not a text. A call from a number I had saved as Wendell Estate in my contacts, but who I had not heard from in maybe 6 months, not since we had finalized the last paperwork on my dad's trust. Wendell did not say hello. He said, "Where are you right now?" I said, "In my closet." "Why?" He said, "Are you alone?" I sat down on the carpet. The shoe forgotten. Something in his voice. Wendell was 68 years old and a man who had once told me, in the middle of a deposition, that he had not raised his voice in 20 years because gentlemen don't have to. Wendell did not get rattled. Wendell had a heart rate of about 40 beats per minute at all times. He sounded rattled. He said, "Listen to me very carefully. Do not go to your sister's house today. Do not eat anything she serves you. Do not sign anything. Do not let her hand you a glass of anything. I am about 30 minutes from your place and I am bringing a binder. Whatever you had planned today, cancel it." I laughed. I actually laughed. That bright, nervous laugh you make when something doesn't compute. I said, "Wendell, it's a kid's birthday party. There's going to be a clown. I'm bringing the ice cream cake." He said, very quietly, "Sweetheart, please. I am asking you. Lock your door. I'm coming." The word sweetheart did it. Wendell had never called me sweetheart in his life. He called me counselor's daughter, sometimes. Mostly he just called me by my last name. Sweetheart was the word a man uses when he is about to tell you something he doesn't want you to hear. I said, "Okay." I locked the door, and I sat on the floor of my closet next to one nude pump and I waited. Before I tell you what was in that binder, I need you to do me one favor. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're listening from tonight. I'm curious how far this story is going to travel, because for a long time I thought I was the only person in the world this had ever happened to. Turns out we're all carrying somebody. Wendell got there in 22 minutes. He did not bring the binder up to my door. He brought it inside a cooler bag that, on first glance, looked like the kind you'd use for groceries. He set it on my kitchen island, and then he turned around and locked my deadbolt himself. Then, the chain. Then he checked the patio sliders. I said, "Wendell, you're scaring me." He said, "Good. I want you scaring me." He said, "Good. I want you scared. Scared people pay attention." He sat me down at my own kitchen island like I was a client. Then he said the sentence I will never forget for as long as I live. He said, "I need you to look at what I'm about to show you, the way an accountant looks at a balance sheet that's been cooked. Not the way a sister looks at a sister. Can you do that for me?" I nodded. I couldn't speak. He opened the cooler bag and pulled out a binder, maybe 3 inches thick. Tabbed. Color-coded. The man had been working on this for a while. The first page was a court filing, an emergency ex parte petition for guardianship of an incapacitated adult. The petitioners were listed as my older sister and her husband. The respondent, the alleged incapacitated adult, was me. I read the words acute psychiatric decompensation. I read the words substance dependency suspected. I read the words immediate danger to self, others, and the corpus of the family trust. I did not laugh this time. I was past laughing. I was somewhere very cold and very quiet, like the inside of a refrigerator. I said, "She's saying I'm crazy." Wendell said, "She's saying you're so crazy that a judge needs to take away your right to manage your own money and your own medical decisions. Today. By Tuesday. Without you in the room." I turned to the second tab. There was a photograph of me. I knew exactly when it had been taken. It was at my dad's memorial, 2 months earlier. In the picture, I was wearing the cream-colored cashmere sweater my dad had bought me for Christmas the year before he died. The front of the sweater was soaked dark, almost black, in a long dripping stain from collarbone to hem. My hair was wild. My mouth was open. I looked in that picture exactly like a woman who had lost her mind in public. The caption beneath the photo, neatly typed, read, "Respondent demonstrating erratic behavior at father's interment service, screaming at attendees and refusing comfort." I remembered that day. I remembered the wet wool smell of my dad's coffin in the rain. I remembered my older sister coming up to me with 2 glasses of red wine for a toast for Daddy. And I remembered her hands sort of catching on my sleeve. And I remembered the cold splash and her voice rising into that beautiful theatrical wail. Oh my God, what are you doing? Why are you grabbing it? Somebody please. She's not okay. She's not okay. I had not been grabbing anything. My hands had been at my sides. She had thrown the wine at me and stepped back fast enough to make it look like I had lunged. I sat there in my kitchen and I felt the whole memory rearrange itself, the way a lock turns when the right key finally goes in. She hadn't been clumsy. She hadn't been overwhelmed by grief. She had been working. At our father's funeral, with the dirt still loose on his grave, my older sister had been collecting evidence. I whispered, "She staged it." Wendell said, "She staged all of it. Keep going." I kept going. There were affidavits from people whose names I half recognized. A woman who had once worked the front desk at my old gym. A guy who had dated me for 3 weeks in 2019. A neighbor of my sister's I had met exactly twice. Each one swore, in formal legal language, that they had personally witnessed me being incoherent, paranoid, threatening, drunk in the middle of the day, screaming at strangers in parking lots. There was a calendar log, pages of it, missed appointments I supposedly had, therapy sessions I had supposedly no-showed, prescriptions I had supposedly failed to pick up, a whole paper trail of a woman falling apart. None of it was real. I looked up at Wendell. My voice fell very far away. I said, "Why? She hates me fine, but why this? Why like this? I pay her son's preschool tuition. I co-signed her car. What burned the whole house down?" Wendell didn't answer right away. He just slid one more sheet of paper across the granite. It was a letter from a real estate development firm in Boulder. It was a non-binding letter of intent to purchase the property at my father's old address, the original house, the one that had been in our family for 4 generations, the one with the apple orchard and the 60-acre pasture along the creek. The letter offered $9.2 million, cash, all in, contingent on clear title and an executed easement release within 90 days, $9.2 million. I sat back. My ears were ringing. I had been paying the property taxes on that place out of my own pocket since my dad got sick. $41,000 a year. It had never occurred to me that the orchard was worth real money. To me, it had been the place where my grandmother taught me how to can tomatoes. To me, it had been the porch swing where my dad let me sip his lemonade in July. It had been a house, a liability even, something I shouldered because I was the one who could. To my sister, apparently, it had been a winning lottery ticket she could not cash, because the trust was mine to administer. And she could not sell what she did not control, unless, of course, the trustee, me, were declared incompetent. The cold that came over me then was something I had never felt before in my life. It was not rage. It was not even sadness. It was the very specific, very clinical stillness of realizing that the person who had braided my hair before my 8th grade dance had just tried to murder my legal personhood for a payday. I closed the binder. My hands were not shaking. They were not even warm. I said, "Okay, she wants me to be a crazy woman. I'll give her a crazy woman, and then I am going to take her apart with a tweezer." Wendell exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for 40 minutes. He said, "There she is. I'll be honest with you. The next thing I did was probably stupid." I opened my laptop. I had a notification waiting in my inbox, one of those social media alerts I had never bothered to turn off. My older sister was live. Right then. She was streaming. I clicked it. She was sitting on her couch. She was wearing one of those expensive cream linen wrap cardigans that cost more than my mortgage payment. Her hair was up in a soft, deliberately messy bun. She had no makeup on except, and I want you to notice this because I noticed it, a perfect, careful smudge of mascara underneath her eyes, as if she had been crying all morning. She had set up a single soft ring light. The light made her eyes look enormous and wet. She was talking very, very quietly. The way you talk when you want people to lean in. She was saying, "I never wanted to do this on camera. I really didn't. But you guys have been asking why I haven't been posting, and I owe you the truth. My little sister is sick. She has been sick for a long time. We tried to do an intervention this morning. Just family, just love. And she wouldn't even come to the door. She thinks we're against her. She's so paranoid right now that we may have to take legal steps just to keep her safe from herself." And if you've ever loved someone with a brain that lies to them, you know what I'm going through. The comments were rolling. You're such a good big sister. Praying for your family. Mental illness is a thief. I watched my older sister cry on her ringlet couch, and I understood something I had never understood before in my life. She was not lying. She was lying about the facts. Of course she was lying about the facts. Of course she was lying about the facts. But she had done something far more sophisticated than lie. She had done something I have come to think of as weaponized concern. By dressing her cruelty in the soft cardigan of worry, she had stolen from me the right to be angry. If I picked up the phone right now and screamed at her, I would not look like a woman defending herself. I would look exactly like the unstable sister she had been describing for 10,000 strangers. She had not just been trying to take the orchard, she had been pre-stealing my reputation so that anything I said in self-defense would sound like the symptom, not the truth. It was the most elegant trap I had ever seen anyone build. I closed the laptop. I said out loud, to nobody, "All right, you want a paper trail. Let me show you what one actually looks like." I want to pause here because at this part of the story, I always feel like I have to explain something. Some of you watching might be thinking, why didn't you just call her? Confront her? I get that. A year ago, I would have thought the same thing. But here's what I have learned about this particular kind of person, and you might know one too. The moment you confront them, they get to write the script. They get to play wounded. They get to call your shared people and say, "She just attacked me, can you believe it?" Confrontation hands them the microphone, so I didn't call her. I logged into my own cloud account. If she had built a paper trail of me being scattered and forgetful, it had to live somewhere. And I am, by trade, a forensic accountant. I find money that doesn't want to be found. So I started where I always start, with the metadata. I pulled up my shared family calendar, the one I had set up 4 years earlier so my sister and I could keep track of family stuff, my dad's medical appointments, school pickups for her son when she needed me. I scrolled back 6 months and looked at every appointment I had supposedly missed. There were dozens. A dentist appointment in October I had no memory of. A lunch with a college friend in January I had supposedly stood her up at. A standing therapy appointment every other Wednesday that I had never made and never attended. I clicked on one of the entries. I checked the edit history. Created by my account. Last modified by my account. Device, iPad Pro. Logged in from an IP address I did not recognize. In a zip code I did not live in. I sat there for a long time. My brother-in-law has an iPad Pro. He has, in fact, the exact iPad Pro that lives on the kitchen counter of the house in Highlands Ranch where I was supposed to be eating birthday cake in 27 minutes. I checked the IP address against the one I knew was my sister's home internet. They matched. It had not been my dad's death making me forgetful. It had not been grief. It had not been working too many hours. My brother-in-law had been quietly logging into my calendar for months, moving meetings by half an hour so I would show up late, deleting reminders, adding fake appointments I had never agreed to so I would look like someone who could not keep her own life straight. He had been gaslighting my Google Calendar, and every time I had apologized to my sister, every time I had said I think I'm losing it lately, every time I had laughed nervously and said I don't know where my head is, she had been right there, patting my hand, saying, "Honey, are you sure you're okay? Do you want me to find you somebody to talk to? I'm worried about you." They had not just been watching me struggle. They had been the ones loosening every step under my feet. I took screenshots. I took screenshots of the screenshots. I exported the metadata logs into a CSV file. I am a person who, professionally, builds cases against people who think they are clever. And these two had been very, very clever. But they had not been clever enough. I made a folder. I named it Receipts. By the time the sun started going down, the storm that had been forecast all week had rolled in over the foothills. Real Colorado weather. Wet snow turning to sleet, the kind that makes the power lines hum. I was at my kitchen island building a timeline and a spreadsheet when somebody started banging on my front door. It wasn't a knock. It was the kind of pounding a person does with the side of their fist. Frantic. Wrong. I checked the camera on my doorbell. It was my niece. She was 12 years old. She was supposed to be at her own little brother's birthday party. She was wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, and her hair was wet and stuck to her face, and she was holding a blue spiral notebook against her chest. I opened the door. She came inside before I even said anything. She was shaking so hard she could not get the hood of her sweatshirt down. She said, "Aunt, They don't know I'm here. I told them I was going to ride bikes. Please don't tell them I'm here. I got her a towel. I got her a blanket off the back of my couch. I made her tea because I did not know what else to do with my hands. I watched her try to hold the mug, and her fingers were so cold she couldn't grip it. My older sister had always kept this kid at a kind of distance from me. Holiday cards, photo ops, careful supervision. I had not been alone with my own niece in maybe 2 years. I looked at her face, really looked at her, and I did not see a kid. I saw a person who had been holding a secret too big for her body for too long. She said, I had to sign something. I said, okay. She said, Mom told me if I didn't sign it, she would take away my horse. She said you were sick and I had to help. She said it was just words, just to help you. But it wasn't just words, was it? I asked her, very gently, what the words said. She told me. She had been made to write in her own 12-year-old handwriting, which would play beautifully in front of a judge, that I had screamed at her on Christmas, that I had thrown a glass against the wall in front of her, that I had told her her father was, and I'm quoting my sister's wording here as my niece reported it, a parasite who would die in a gutter. None of that had happened. None of it. I felt something behind my ribs go very, very still. She wasn't done. She reached into her hoodie pocket, the front pouch, and pulled out something the size of a deck of cards. It was an old iPhone. The screen was cracked. She said, Dad has like 4 phones. He doesn't think I know about this one. I took it from his desk drawer. I think there's stuff on it. I looked at this kid. I said, why did you bring this to me? She said, because you're the only adult in our family who has never lied to me. I want to tell you, very honestly, that there is a moment in a person's life when the fight stops being about you. Up until that second, sitting in my kitchen with my binder and my screenshots, I had been fighting for my house, for my reputation, for the orchard, for my pride. The second my niece said, you're the only adult who has never lied to me, the stakes of the entire war changed. Because if my sister won, if the guardianship went through, if they sold the orchard, if they walked away from this with $9 million and my legal personhood erased, then this little girl was going to grow up in that house, watching them celebrate. Learning, in the bones of her, that lying works, that cruelty pays, that family is a thing you cash in. I was not going to let that be her education. I made her sit on my couch with a blanket, and I made her eat a grilled cheese sandwich because she had not eaten since breakfast. While she ate, I called Wendell. Wendell got back in his car. The phone she had brought me was not locked, because my brother-in-law was the kind of man who reused the same 4-digit passcode for everything. I tried his birthday. I was in a folder labeled, with no apparent irony, Project Sunset, were 3 things. A signed letter of intent with the Boulder developer, dated a full 8 weeks earlier, with a non-refundable earnest deposit of $750,000 already wired and accepted. A demolition timeline with the target start date, and I want you to hear this, of the Monday after the guardianship hearing. 48 hours after they expected the judge to sign, bulldozers were already booked, and an audio file. A voice memo. I played it on my kitchen counter, my brother-in-law's voice, tinny and casual, the way men talk when they don't think anyone's listening. She's tougher than I thought. She's not breaking. We need the order Tuesday or we lose the deposit. My older sister's voice, calm as a lake. She'll break when the sheriff serves her. And once she's at the facility, the kid won't talk. The kid is too soft. But she knows what happens if she opens her mouth. My brother-in-law laughed. If the kid talks, we'll just say it runs in the family. The recording ended. My niece was sitting on my couch eating a grilled cheese. I went into my bathroom and I closed the door and I leaned against the sink and I made a sound I am not going to describe. Then I washed my face. Then I came out. Wendell got to my house at almost midnight. He took the iPad, he took the spreadsheet, he took my screenshots. He said, we have enough to bury them in court. It will take 8 months, maybe a year. I said, I don't want 8 months. I want them to do it to themselves. He looked at me. I said, how fast can you pull the federal records on the orchard? He said, why? I said, because my dad once told me, when I was about 9 years old, that he had signed something with the federal government back in 1987 that meant the back 40 would never be developed. Ever. He told me it was the most patriotic thing he had ever done. I thought he was being dramatic. He wasn't being dramatic, was he? Wendell got very, very quiet. He said, "Your father signed a permanent conservation easement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The orchard cannot be subdivided. It cannot be commercially developed. It cannot be demolished. It cannot be sold for any use other than continued agricultural production. The penalty for violation is federal seizure of the entire parcel and criminal referral for fraud." I said, "And my sister?" He said, "Has just sold a property she legally cannot deliver to a developer who is going to find out the second he runs his title search that the deal is dead. He is going to sue her for the $750,000, and the federal government is going to want to know exactly what she told him to get him to wire that deposit." I said, "Good. I want to tell you what I did next because some of you have asked in the comments, what would you have done? And I want you to know exactly what I did because I am not proud of all of it, but I am not ashamed of any of it. I went to the hearing on Tuesday. I went to the hearing wearing a soft beige cardigan. I had not slept. I made sure I had not slept. I made sure I had not slept. I let my hair be a little unwashed. I let my eyes be a little glassy. When the judge asked me questions, I answered them slowly, and I let my voice catch, and once, I let a tear roll down my face on cue. I agreed to a temporary limited guardianship, estate only. I agreed to let my older sister manage the orchard property, just the orchard, just for 90 days, pending a full evaluation. My sister was so excited she could barely keep it off her face. She thought she had won. She walked out of that courthouse already on the phone to the developer. By that night, she was live again, on her couch, in her cardigan, telling her followers that she was just so relieved her sister was finally getting the help she had needed for years. I went home and I waited. The bulldozers showed up on Thursday. So did the United States Department of Agriculture. So did 2 agents from the FBI. So did a representative from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, because it turned out my father had also, separately, registered the original 1903 farmhouse on a state historic registry. My sister had signed a contract promising the developer he could demolish a house that was federally and state protected, and an orchard that could never be anything but an orchard, in exchange for cash she had already partially spent. It is a federal crime to wire fraud a developer. It is a federal crime to attempt to deliver a property in violation of a recorded easement. It is also a federal crime, as it turns out, to suborn perjury from a minor child. The arrests happened during her live stream. She was, when the agents knocked on her door, in the middle of telling her followers that the orchard sale was going to fund a new wellness retreat she was launching. The sound on the stream cut out about 4 seconds after she opened the door. The video stayed up for another 9 minutes before somebody took it down. I have not watched it. I do not need to. My brother-in-law tried to flee. He got as far as a Comfort Inn outside Cheyenne. My sister got 11 years. He got 14. The developer got most of his money back from the seized assets and from suing them personally into oblivion. The orchard is still the orchard. The apple trees are budding right now, as a matter of fact. I drove out there last weekend. My niece lives with me now. I filed for emergency custody 3 days after the arrests, using the recording of her parents discussing how to keep her quiet. The judge, a different judge, a better one, granted it inside of an hour. Her younger brother went to live with their paternal grandmother, who is a lovely woman who never liked my sister much. The 2 kids see each other every weekend. My niece is in therapy. She is doing, in the words of her therapist, remarkably well, considering. She has started writing in a journal, a blue spiral notebook like the one she brought me. She picked it out herself. A few months after the sentencing, my older sister wrote me a letter from the facility. I have not opened it. It is in a drawer in my kitchen. I am not sure I will ever open it. I have thought a lot about whether that makes me a hard person, and I have decided that it doesn't. There is a difference between forgiveness and access. I can wish her well from a distance of 11 years and a federal correctional institution. What I cannot do, what I will not do, is hand her another door key. Here is what I learned, and I am going to say it straight because I think some of you need to hear it. The most dangerous person in your life is not the person who screams at you. It is the person who cries about you, to other people, in a soft sweater, in a soft light, in a soft voice that sounds exactly like worry. Because that person is not trying to defeat you in an argument. That person is trying to write a story in which you are the villain and they are the saint, and they are casting the audience before you even know there's a play. If somebody in your life keeps worrying about you to other people, not to you, about you, to pay attention. If you keep finding yourself apologizing for things you don't remember doing, pay attention. If your own calendar starts feeling like a stranger's, pay attention. If a child in your family pulls you aside and tells you something you don't want to be true, believe her. And if your lawyer ever calls you on a Saturday morning and tells you not to go to brunch, lock your door, pour yourself a glass of water, sit down, and get ready to read the binder. I think about that Saturday morning a lot. The nude pump on the closet floor, the cooler bag on my kitchen island, the exact temperature of the air right before Wendell said the word sweetheart. What I keep coming back to is this. None of what happened to me happened by accident. Camille did not wake up one morning and decide, on a whim, to file for guardianship. She built that case for months, maybe years. Every time she patted my hand at a holiday and said, "Honey, are you okay? You seem tired," she was laying a brick. Every time her husband logged into my calendar and moved a meeting by half an hour, he was laying a brick. They were quiet bricks, patient bricks. And I did not see the wall going up because I was the one paying the property taxes and answering the phone at 2 a.m. when the school called and signing the cosign on the car. I was busy being the dependable one, and dependable people, I have learned, are the easiest people in the world to frame. Because nobody questions when the dependable one finally cracks. Everybody is sort of waiting for it. The cause and effect of this whole story is not mystical. It is mathematical. Camille spent the orchard money before she had it. She wired a deposit she could not return. She forged a paper trail using her own 12-year-old daughter's hand. She made a federal crime out of greed and a federal crime out of coercing a child. And the federal government does not care how soft your cardigan is on the live stream. The bulldozer arrived on the day she had ordered. The agents arrived on the day my father, 38 years earlier, had made sure they would. My dad signed an easement in 1987 that he probably forgot about by 1990. That single piece of paper, folded into a drawer in a federal office in Washington, was the rope my sister hanged herself with. She just didn't know it was there. If there is anything I want you to take from sitting with me tonight, it is 3 small things, and they are not deep, but they are mine. Be the kind of person whose words still mean something when nobody is recording, because the day they finally start recording, your reputation will speak for you before your lawyer does. That is the moral piece of it. Read the paperwork. All of it. Even the boring 1987 paperwork from your dead father's filing cabinet. Smart is not the same as quick. Smart is the woman who, at 1 a.m, asks her attorney one more question. That is the wisdom piece. And when you find out somebody you loved built a wall around you, brick by quiet brick, do not scream. Do not collapse. Sit down. Pour the water. Open the binder. The strongest thing I ever did was not yell at my sister. It was the 11 days I spent very calmly cataloging metadata while she thought I was breaking. That is the grit piece. Tessa is asleep upstairs as I'm telling you this. The orchard is still the orchard. And I am, finally, exactly the woman my father raised.